I'm AJ, and today we're gonna look at Lord of the Rings: Rise to War. We're gonna do a tier list for good commanders. We're only gonna include season 1 and season 2 commanders because I didn't get on my main account to season 3, so I don't wanna give you guys any information that wouldn't be right, and this would be the main purpose of the video. Now we're gonna start right away looking at the tier 1 commanders. We have split the categories into D, C, B, A, and S, which are the typical ones, and then tips, commanders that have a specific skill or ability that would reduce the tips time, or that would give you increased experience for tips, or so on. And siege commanders that would be especially good against let's say forts or stuff like that to do more siege damage. Now let's jump right into it. The first commander that we're looking at is Marianne Pippen. Marianne Pippen is a tier 1 Hobbit commander, and they are not specifically great in any scenario besides doing tips and maybe taking tiles. They don't have a focus within their skill set. They work with Ents and they work with Hobbits, this not being some really good units within the game at the moment, so that's why they're not really versatile. They don't have a skill build that would be good with the units that are good at the moment in PvP. Now, Boromir, overall a good commander. It has things that are good for tips. It's one of the free commanders on the good side. It's the second commander that you get, besides, for example, Elwin or Dwalin, depending on where you are starting the game. But it doesn't have anything specific about him that would make him good. If you don't have any other commanders, he's not a bad option. He's definitely better than Marianne Pippen or some other commanders that are out there, but he's not overall great in any specific field. Now, next one, Aragorn. He's the absolute best commander when it comes to siege. He has a skill in which he gives +7 siege to your units, which is really good. The 7 siege is per individual unit. So for example, the Guardians have 20 siege, so every single unit would have instead 27 siege. So one command of Guardians would do 2,700 siege instead of 2,000, which is a drastic increase. It's an increase of 30%, which is really good when you're looking, for example, to destroy a fort fast, to take keep, or to destroy a fortress for the enemy faction in order to be able to run them over. Moving on, Ori. Ori is not great. To be totally honest, it was the first commander that I ever got from my polls, and I wasn't happy with him. I tried to do him a bit, tried to take some tiles, tried to see what he would be good at, but he wasn't good specifically at anything. He has a skill that reduces tips, so that's the only thing that me personally am using Ori for, in order to, for example, if I have many tips to do at one point, I save up tips and everything like that. Ori would be one of the commanders that I use for that. Next up, we have Elwin. Now, Elwin is one of the best cavalry commanders out there. That's not only by her skill build, but also by the nature of her being really accessible. Being a tier 1 commander, it means that you can get her really fast, so you can actually get her to respect 5 really quick. Now, we're looking mostly at commanders at respect 5. There is some situational commanders that would be only good at respect 1 or respect 3 or respect 5. This would depend a lot on the commander, but we're trying to look at commanders at their best ability, at their at least respect 5 with the best possible gear on them, and units that are tailored to what they're looking for. So Elwin at respect 5 is an absolute goddess. She would be S rank commander not only because she's good, but she's really accessible as well. In terms of the next commander, we have Haldir. Now, Haldir is an elven commander that can actually do a lot of damage in some situations, and only against certain matchups. Haldir overall is not that balanced. It doesn't have anything. For example, Boromir, he is balanced. He can do different things. He does mediocre against some commanders, and good against some commanders, but you're not going to find Boromir doing absolutely terrible against a commander, unless he's really out-leveled or anything like that. But if they're on the same foot, then he would do at least mediocre. Haldir has situations in which he can totally stomp. So, for example, his respect 10 item has a requirement of only fighting on lands that produce wood, which is really, really niche. So that's why it's making Haldir a situational commander. In some situations he stomps, in some situations he stomps. So that's why, in my opinion, he's somewhere middle of the pack. Me personally, I would put him in B tier, because he is better than the majority of commanders, but that are accessible. But he is not something. He's not a commander that's outstanding in any way. Now, Dwalin, again, like Elwin, he has something that he focuses on. Elwin focuses on cavalry and her units, on mounted units. Dwalin just focuses on brute damage. So Dwalin, as a tier 1 commander, he's the one that has the best output of damage. So, for example, against any other commander that's tier 1 on both good and evil, he can do really good. The only exception being Grima on the evil side. That is because of madness, so you run into the risk of Dwalin actually killing his own army. But overall, Dwalin has a really good skill set. Once he gets to level to respect 3, he can do tons of damage, and at respect 5, considering the new update to the Dwarven units, he can actually go against the Witch King as well. It's not the best to go against the Witch King, but he is overall a good commander, and he can do good even against the Witch King that mainly uses Alchemist, so burn damage. Now, moving on, we have Boromir. So Boromir is an overall balanced commander. He is really good in some scenarios. In my opinion, he is better than Haldir most of the time, because he can consistently give a good output. He can consistently give good reports and everything like that. So Boromir is still B tier, but he's definitely above Haldir in my opinion. Moving on to the tier 2 commanders, we are looking at Gandalf the Gray. Gandalf the Gray is the best commander to actually take tiles, best accessible commander. Because there are some other healers that are not so accessible, that are really good at taking tiles. You don't have that many losses and so on. But Gandalf the Grey, you have a chest with him at the beginning of Season 1. You have that chest for an unlimited amount of time, so you can actually get him guaranteed. And once he gets to respect 3 or 5, Gandalf the Grey is actually really good. It's a counter to Witch King. Not the best counter, but overall a good counter to Witch King. And at the same time, when you're playing in your early game, the most important thing is to not lose troops, and Gandalf is absolutely great at this. So in my opinion, out of the tier 2s, Gandalf actually deserves to be in S tier. Now I didn't put this in a specific order, we can reorder them afterwards, but if I were to compare them with Dwalin and Elwin, Gandalf the Gray would be above Dwalin and Elwin in my opinion. Obviously this is situational in between Dwalin and Elwin, but Gandalf the Gray in my opinion he is above those. Moving on, Frodo and Sam, again, another commander, another Hobbit commander, which is really similar to Marianne Pippen. The same, I have them and I only use them for tips. Unfortunately, they don't have a great skill set, they don't have anything in particular that stands out, they're not good in many matchups. So overall, if a commander is not that accessible, it doesn't doing good in most matchups, I would prefer to use that commander for tips. Moving on, Aragorn, the tier 2 version, to my opinion, is a C tier. So overall, he can do great damage, but he has a lot of losses. So if you look at an Aragorn that has a good skill build, R5, great gear on him, he's still gonna lose a lot of units within tiles or within fights with other commanders. He's not someone like Elwin or Dwalin or, for example, Gandalf that can have a lot less losses, either because he outpowers the enemy really quick or he has extraordinary heal. So Aragorn deals good damage, but he's not on the same level as Dwalin, for example, and he's not as accessible as Dwalin, so that's why I've put him in C tier. Moving on, Balin. Overall, a good commander. It's a dwarf commander. He has a good skill set. He can do a lot of damage. He has some synergy with his army as well, but he doesn't have an output of damage that is monstrous the same way Dwalin and everything like that. So if you have a commander that's lower tier, so for example a tier 1 commander that can do better at the same thing as a tier 2 commander, in my opinion there is always better to go for the tier 1 because you're gonna grow the respect faster, and it's gonna be easier to actually focus on that commander because you have two ways of actually increasing the respect and everything like that. Arwyn, in my opinion, is a really good healer, but at the same time, she only does healing. Like, she can do tremendous amounts of healing. She can do 200k healing within a fight and everything like that. But if you only do healing and you don't do anything else, at the end of the day, you're gonna get overpowered. And if you keep losing troops, it's not gonna lead anywhere. Like, if you have something that makes sure that you don't lose as many troops, so besides your healing, you reduce the enemy's damage, you reduce the damage taken, you stun, you have a skill set that is built around the healing, then yeah, that's totally fine. For example, this is what's happening with Gandalf. But to just have healing and not be an overall flexible commander in terms of the army, in terms of the skill set, in terms of the gear that you're putting on her, it doesn't make sense to go for her compared to, for example, Gandalf or other healing commanders. So in my opinion, she's still D tier. She's not absolute trash. I would use her if, for example, I don't have Gandalf or I don't have Elwin, but it would depend on what you would use her. If you are looking to get some tiles or to make a road to a specific place, then yeah, Arwyn can do that, because you're gonna take lower tiles with her. She can do it without any problem. She wouldn't be a main commander, so that's totally fine. Next up, we're looking at Eledon. Eledon is a new commander from Season 2. He is an elf commander. Overall, he is pretty balanced. He's working well with mounted units. So, in my opinion, he is above the middle of the pack, to put it this way. And overall, he gives pretty good buffs to his units, and he can do quite a bit of damage as well. So he's above the ones that we mentioned in the middle of the pack. But at the end of the day, if you compare him to how easy it is to get Elwin and the amount of healing she does and everything like that, he falls beneath Elwin, in my opinion, because it would be a lot easier for a free-to-play player, for example, or a small whale or anything like that, to get Elwin to respect 5 or respect 10 compared to getting him to respect 5 or respect 10. One of the new-ish commanders that we're looking at is Elro here as well. Elro here, it looked good on the paper when he came out, but at the same time he doesn't have a specific focus. It's really hard to find a build on him that would bring in consistent wins, and besides that, he's really hard to get to respect 5 compared to a tier 1. So in terms of accessibility, he's not that great. In terms of actually getting results, in terms of both evil fights and good fights, he's not that consistent. So in my opinion, he's somewhere C tier. He's maybe on par with Dwalin, to be totally honest, a bit below Arwyn, in my opinion, depending on the build that you're running, but at the same time, not a great overall commander. Next, we're looking at Legolas. Legolas, in my opinion, is a good commander. I'm gonna put it in A tier. He can do a lot of damage. For the good side, he works well against Mumas. So, for example, if you're Gondor and you're looking to fight Mordor, Legolas is one good commander that you can use, for example, against Lords, because it's the commander that, on the good side, has damage on par with Lords. He focuses on only one thing, and that's him doing damage rather than his units. So, for example, if you're playing non-role-playing server, him with Mumakil again is absolutely ridiculous, the same as Lurch is, and the same as other commanders that are doing tremendous amount of damage. The only reason why I would put him below Dwalin is because he's not as accessible as Dwalin, and their damage is similar depending on the build. Legolas in some situations can do a bit more damage, but it's nothing that would be so significant in order to say, oh, he's definitely above Dwalin. So just thinking about it from a free-to-play perspective, getting Dwalin to respect 3 or 5, it's a lot easier than getting Legolas to respect 3, which is realistically the only thing that you need for him. Next, we have Gimli. Now, Gimli, in my opinion, is the top choice for Dwarver commanders in terms of playing against the good side, because he has a skill that makes your enemy not recover HP for a certain amount of time. We're not including, when I'm saying he's my top choice, we're not including Dane, because Dane is a tier 3. He's really hard to get, but at the same time, they have similar skill builds. They can do tremendous amount of damage, and Gimli is one of the commanders that I can see consistently destroying Gandalf the Gray, destroying Elwin and everything like that. But there are other factors that we're looking at in here. That's why I've only put Gimli at the top A. The best commander in the A rank, in my opinion, is gonna be Gimli, because He has that anti-healing, he can do a lot of damage and everything like that, but at the same time, you wouldn't use Gimli in your early game, for example, so it would take some time to actually develop him into late game and everything like that. Obviously, if you get a 300 tile and you mock battle him, maybe in a couple of days you get him above 40, yeah, then that is a viable scenario. But if, for example, you're playing against evil, the Gimli wouldn't do as good as, for example, Gandalf the Gray or Elwin. Next up, we have Teody. Now, Teody, in my opinion, is an absolute beast. He's the best commander for mounted units. Once you get Teody to respect 5, he's really hard to counter. Not by a Witch King. A Witch King can destroy Teody. Witch King with the burn damage, full alchemist and so on can destroy Teody, but if you're looking at other commanders that are on both good and evil side, Teody does really well. He's a commander that buffs his army a lot. At respect 3 he gives them a lot of heal, at respect 1 he gives them a lot of decreased damage and it also increases their damage a bit, and at respect 5 it increases their damage tremendously and it also decreases the enemy's defense. So if, for example, for Teody on the good side you'd be running bow knights and they'd be doing a lot more damage because of him. So that's why, in my opinion, he's an absolute beast, and in my opinion he is by far the best tier 2 commander. Next up, after Teody, we have Elmer. Elmer is another mounted units commander. He's nowhere near Teody because he is a combination between him dealing some damage and buffing his units, so he doesn't focus on one thing, so he doesn't do either of them to a great extent. Like, he can do some damage and his units can do some damage, so he's overall balanced. But for example with Teody, you would see him with like 20k damage or 30k damage, but you would see his units at 150 to 100k damage, so bringing in consistent numbers and really high numbers. For Elmer, you wouldn't see that, so overall the actual output of damage is a lot lower than Teody. So that's why, in my opinion, if you can get Elwin, which has better sustain, or if you can get Teody, Elwin at respect 5 or Teody at respect 5, they're both, in my opinion, a lot better than Elmer. So that's why, in my opinion, Elmer would only be B tier. And now we have a couple of more tier 2 commanders to look at. The next one is Imrahil. Now, Imrahil is a new commander from Season 2. Imrahil has some specific uses. He's overall balanced. He works really well with mounted units. He works really well in Gondor. But one thing that for me makes him to go to A tier is that he's the best commander against Sauron by far. So at respect 5, you don't only get stun immune, damage reduced while you're stunned, you also get damage reduced while you're under madness effect. So Imrahil is the absolute counter to Sauron. So that's why overall, looking at him, it makes so much sense against evil side, against Grima, against Sauron, against anything like that that stuns or that uses madness, to use Imrahil, and he would actually dominate this kind of fights. A very specific use, but he's the absolute best at it, and there's no other commander within the game by Season 2, including Season 2, that can have the same skill set. So that's why Imrahil, in my opinion, is a really good commander. Overall balanced, overall good, especially if you're in Gondor and you have Swan Knights. Really good, in my opinion. Now we have Denethor. Denethor, in my opinion, is absolute bad. If you look at his skill set, it doesn't sound like he's a bad commander. But again, he does not inflict damage. His units die consistently within every single battle, and like you do not have anything that comes good out of a battle with Denethor. Even if he's at respect 5, level 50 and all good items, if you fight against someone that has really good items, respect 5 and level 50, Denethor 95% of the times he would lose. He's the commander that me personally, I never got past level 1, neither in season 1 nor in season 2, because I don't feel he brings anything to the table. Now this is generally my opinion. I know there are some people that might run Denethor, and that's totally fine if you don't have any other alternative, but there are a lot better alternatives out there. So now this is for tier 2 commanders. Now we're gonna jump into tier 3 commanders, and we're gonna start with Gil-galad. Gil-galad is one of the commanders that has White Council, the same as Gandalf the Gray, and some others that will follow. Overall, a good Witch King counter. Overall, a good commander. Not as accessible considering he's a tier 3, but out of the tier 3s, he gets the most impact out of his respect 1 skills. So as soon as you get respect 0 skills, so as soon as you get Gil-galad, you know that he's gonna make a difference with the skill set that he has. He has evasion, he has stun for the commander, he increases the damage for your Elven units. So overall, a really good commander. The only bad part about Gil-galad is that he focuses a lot on his evasion, so when, for example, you're fighting a Witch King, yeah, that's good, but if that Witch King has the accessory that gives pursuit to his units, it totally nullifies one of the most important skills within Gil-galad's skill set. But in my opinion, Gil-galad is still a strong commander. It's an A-tier commander, and he can do really good in most matchups. Now we're looking at Elrond. In my opinion, Elrond, besides the fact he's not accessible, his respect 5 skill wasn't working properly, but we're looking at things as if everything is working properly and everything like that. Elmer is not generally good. Like, you're comparing him to other tier 3 commanders, you're comparing him to other S tiers and A tiers, and he doesn't make the cut in my opinion. If everything would work perfectly with him and all his skills would work as they are intended to work, he wouldn't still be above middle of the pack for me. Me personally, I've put him as the best C tier commander. He's definitely above those, but some of those can definitely do better than him. Moving on to Gandalf the White. Now, Gandalf the White is overall a good commander. He has a similar skill set to Gandalf the Gray. He has some synergy with mounted units. Overall, he's a balanced commander. He can do really good. He has healing. He has everything, damage reduction, and everything that he needs in order to sustain in a fight and make sure that you don't have many losses. Works well against the evil side. So he has a lot of pros about him. But my opinion, Gandalf the White is still an A-tier commander, because Gandalf the Grey, it's more accessible. If you get Gandalf the White to respect 5, he is a really good commander. You can use him as a main instead of Gandalf the Grey, but he is not as accessible as Gandalf the Grey. In my opinion, me personally, I've heard quite a lot of people saying that Gandalf the Grey is actually better in fights. I've seen reports going both ways, to be totally honest. I've seen Gandalf the Gray win, and I've seen Gandalf the White win, facing against each other. So it's something that depends a lot on your skill build. It depends a lot on the troops you have and everything like that. They're both really good commanders, but I would still put Gandalf the White in A tier, just because there are tier 3 units, tier 3 commanders that are doing a lot better than him. Moving on to a tier 3 commander that's actually doing better than him is Galadriel. Now, Galadriel, in my opinion, and not only my opinion, there's a lot of people that said this, Galadriel is the absolute best commander for the good side. At respect 5. At respect 1, she's beyond, she's like atrocious. Like I had Galadriel respect 1. I just exchanged for her as I started season 2, and I thought, oh, Galadriel, she's gonna be really good and everything like that. I leveled her up, and she was only respect 1, and at respect 1 she's absolute trash. At respect 3, she's mediocre. At respect 5, she's an absolute beast. The amount of focus she has, the amount of focus damage she deals, she works well a lot against a lot of commanders, and Galadriel is, in my opinion and many other players' opinion, the absolute best good commander. Next up, we have the King of the Dead. King of the Dead, in my opinion, is generally mediocre before the update. After the update, he became a lot better. I wouldn't put him above Gil-galad and Gandalf the White, in my opinion, but at the same time there's some situation in which he's absolutely overpowered. So to talk about this a bit, in my opinion, he's B tier commander overall. But if you're fighting the good side, he is S tier. If you're fighting the good side and he has Oathbreakers on him, King of the Dead is an absolute beast. Against the evil side and against Galadriel, for example, he does pretty badly. But against generally good side commanders, he would dominate. He is an absolute S tier, and especially if he has Oathbreakers on him, which is the optimal build, he would dominate most matchups. Next up, we have Argon King of Men. Argon King of Men is not great. So I pulled him last week. I was really happy to have him. It came out of a free chest, so I was like, wow, I got lucky. And he's nothing special. Why is he nothing special? Is because there's two ways to build him: buff his units or buff his own damage. Buff his own damage, then his damage is lackluster. Argon, the tier 2 commander, can do more damage than Argon King of Men, which is actually saying a lot, because he's more accessible. He can, you can even buy it with a couple of dollars. So Argon King of Men, he's not great in that scenario. So if you can have a tier 2 that does better damage than a tier 3, then obviously you're gonna go for the tier 2, because you can increase the respect faster. If you're looking at buffing the units, again, he doesn't have that much of a skill set to say that he only focuses on that. So he can buff his units a bit, but you're doing that for what, the first 30 levels, and then you need to go into something else, which is buffing his damage. So he's doing half and half. He's not someone like Teody that, for example, you're gonna use all his skill points in skills that are buffing the units. So that's why, in my opinion, he's middle of the pack. He's even below Aragorn tier 2, and that's about it about him, to be totally honest. I was really happy to get him, and afterwards I traded him, and he couldn't do anything that was specifically good. So he couldn't do anything to an extent of which I would say, oh, this is a commander that's really good at that. The only thing The only thing that he has going for him, in my opinion, is that he goes well against Sauron or madness type commanders and stuff like that. But at the same time, you have Imrahil, that's a tier 2 that can do that in a more efficient way at respect 5. So that's why I'm looking at him and I'm like, okay, he's a tier 3, he has some good uses. And if you don't have any other commanders that are tier 3 or that are at the absolute best of tier 2 or stuff like that, then you can use them. But if you have any of the above, I would personally wouldn't use Argon King of Men. Next up we have Radagast the Brown. Radagast the Brown, again, in my opinion, is middle of the pack, somewhere around B tier, with some exceptions. So Radagast is the same as Gandalf the Gray. He's really good at healing. He usually draws on fights. He doesn't take much losses. Overall, he's a better healer and protecting the units better than Gandalf the Grey, so he has that going better for him. But considering he's a tier 3, he's not that accessible. He's obviously, you have to invest a lot more to actually get him to that point. In order to run a healer build on him, you need respect 3. In order to run the beast build on him, you need respect 5. At respect 5, the beast build on him has some uses and in some situation can be overpowered. But at the same time, he would be using eagles, which are not the best at the moment. They are a tier 4 unit and everything like that, but most compositions would use ranged units, and eagles have a built-in way of actually dealing more damage to them, which is by ranged units. So this way, even if you get him to respect 5 and you use the beast build and you have the best gear possible on him, it wouldn't be that overpowered. You wouldn't look at him and be like, wow, that's a mean Gandalf, that's a mean Radagast the Brown. The same way you would look, for example, at the Galadriel at respect 5, being like, wow, that's a Galadriel at respect 5. She has over 500 focus. You get where I'm coming from. But at the same time, the one thing that Radagast the Brown is absolutely the best at is defending. And so Radagast the Brown, you just put him on the keep that you want to defend, on the crossing that you want to defend, and he's the best at that. That's the one thing that Radagast the Brown has above anybody else. He's the best defender in the game. I've seen situations in which 10 armies came at him and all of them all the fights resulted in a draw. After that he was defeated, recall and everything like that. But still, there is no other commander that would last as much as him, in my opinion. And that's why Radagast is the best defender and overall a good commander if you get him to respect 3. But again, he has specific uses. Thranduil, he's the worst tier 3 commander in my opinion. And it's not just my opinion. I have friends that have him at respect 5 and tried like 10 different builds on him. They tried to go with him against Galadriel, against Gil-galad, against Gandalf the White, against King of the Dead, against any good commander. He would lose with any build. Against evil commanders, he has some merit. He can work well against Witch King and everything like that. But at the same time, I feel there are better options than him. And I feel that he is lacking as a tier 3 commander in my opinion. That's why he received some buffs recently. That's why he received some love, because nobody was playing him. I know people that got him to respect 5 because they were like, okay, I have a tier 3, I want to get him to respect 5 and everything like that. He's definitely gonna be good at respect 5. It gives that and that and that. And then they got him to respect 5 and he was absolutely mediocre, to say the best. Moving on, we have Dane. Dane is, in my opinion, an absolute beast. Dane, with no questions asked from my side, is an S tier commander. Why is that, in my opinion? Dane is the highest damage dealing commander in the game. So, if, for example, you have your barracks full and your enemy has his barracks full, your enemy is gonna run out of barracks faster. You have a lot of losses with Dane, that is fair, but at the same time he deals an extreme amount of damage, and besides that he prevents healing as well, so he's extraordinarily good against good side commanders. Dane is overall really balanced in terms of his skill set. He focuses on one thing. The items that you would put on him would buff as well his units, making them more tanky. So this way he would be the units would sustain more in order for him to deal more damage. So Dane, in my opinion, is an absolute beast. He's the second commander I would choose after Galadriel, and overall he is the best damage dealer without any questions in the game. And last but not least, we have Taurian. Is the new Dwarven commander from Season 2. He has a lot of focus on his units, as well as some he has a lot of focus on damage, as well as some focus on his units. As a tier 3 commander, he is really good, I'm not gonna lie. He has consistent damage, especially, for example, you're on Erebor. The same can be said for him and for Dane. They are really overpowered considering how tanky the tier 4 unit is from Erebor. But at the same time, if you compare him to Dane, he is dealing less damage. Still a beast, still dealing a lot of damage. If you get him, then definitely go for him. But if you have a choice between him and Dane, I would definitely go for Dane. So that's why he, in my opinion, is an A tier commander. He's not the same level as Dane, but he's an overall really good commander. So this would be the way I would rank the commanders that are in Season 1 and 2. I didn't get to Season 3, so I cannot include the rest of the commanders, but that should be it for the commanders. One thing that I wanted to mention, this video would go on YouTube as well. The previous one with the 40 chess pulls has went on YouTube as well, and I decided to change the threshold, which will do another chest opening video, to actually going for 100 views on the video rather than 100 subscribers. I realized 100 subscribers wouldn't be a realistic target, considering we're a new channel. We do not have that reach at the moment, but 100 views is something that's realistic, and once we get to that, we'll do 100 chess polls and take it from there. But this would be it for this video. If you want me to do more in-depth commander reviews and everything like that, feel free to leave a comment and tell me what do you want me to focus on in future videos. But it was a pleasure, guys, and feel free to like, share, subscribe this video, and I'll see you in the next one.